In this video, we're going to look at key admission trends for 2024-2025. Over the past few years, we've seen some strong evidence of these trends, and they show no signs of letting up. So it's helpful to have this information so that you can capitalize on it and use it to your advantage. The first trend, and perhaps the most obvious one, is that college admissions is getting harder than ever. And admissions rates have been on the decline for the past 20 plus years. And we now have really solid evidence that shows that this precipitous decline, it just keeps getting harder and harder, and it shows no sign of letting up. And you can see that whether you look at Harvard or NYU, Duke, Carnegie Mellon, Boston College, or Tufts, when you look at their 2006 admissions rates, and then you see a huge decline, 12 years later in 2018, and then now for 2023, that rate continues to decline. And the takeaway from this is not to get overwhelmed by it, but to say that you absolutely need to have a good strategy going into high school. And whether you work with a college consultant or whether you do this research on your own and come up with your own strategy, you can't leave things for chance. Another strong trend we're seeing is the resurgence of the SAT. Top schools have been largely test optional for the past few years with the pandemic, but they're realizing now that there were real problems with that. And so there were some studies done this year. One was a joint study by Dartmouth and Brown, and there was another study by Yale. And both studies found the exact same thing. They found that the best predictor of college success, right, the best predictor of your grades in college was not how well you did in high school. It was not what your teacher recommendations from high school said. It wasn't even the quality of your application essays. It was your SAT score or your ACT score. So it's become impossible now for these schools to ignore that. And MIT already reinstated requiring the SAT a year or two ago. Georgetown requires it, Purdue requires it, Georgia Tech requires it, and a few others. But now Dartmouth will require it. And now Yale will require some form of standardized testing. And you have your option. It could be the SAT or the ACT, or you can even submit your AP or IB scores. But if you go with one of those AP or IB scores, you have to submit all of them. You can't pick and choose. And I want to show you another graph that really kind of highlights why it's so important for all students to submit their SATs. So a lot of colleges, as I mentioned, are test optional. But when you look at who actually gets admitted to these schools, it's very clear that all these schools have a very strong preference for students who submit their scores. So just looking at a few examples, Princeton, Harvard, UPenn, Columbia, and Boston College, you can see that the vast majority of students who are admitted actually submitted their scores, either their SAT or their ACT. And at Princeton and Harvard, it was as high as 85%. And even when you get to an excellent school like Boston College, which is not a top tier school, but it's kind of that next level, 67% of students submitted their scores. And my best advice to students is enroll yourself in a test prep program and take it very seriously. And another big trend we're seeing across the board is that your application needs a clear theme. And what I mean by that is that an admissions officer should be able to look at your resume, look at your grades, look at everything, and very quickly come up with one line to kind of define who you are as a student. And it should read something like this: I'm an academic scholar who also excels at X. That's what you want it to be. You need to be an academic scholar. You need to be getting as high a GPA as possible, taking the most rigorous courses you can. Like, that's the academic scholar part, combined with your SAT score. But you also need to excel in one area outside of class. And it can really be anything. Like, it can be athletics, it can be music, it could be community service, it can be leadership, it can be starting a business, it can be founding a nonprofit. But in this one area outside of class, you really have to show kind of passion and persistence and how you've had a profound impact on a community. And the final trend that we're seeing is you really need to have world-class essays. Your college essays are your one best chance to help differentiate you from everybody else and to put a voice on the application, which otherwise is just kind of like accomplishments and numbers. Just tell a story from your recent life, something that happened to you over the past few years, where you were challenged and where you had to learn and grow, and then talk about how it changed you as a person. Like, it's the simplest formula for hitting an essay out of the park. You know, you don't have to be a brilliant writer. You don't have to be incredibly creative. Those things are nice, but they're not essential. It's more important that you tell a good story about yourself, about how over the past few years, you kind of explored something and went outside of your comfort zone, and it helped you evolve into the person you are now. I hope this helps. I'll provide some information about this video in the description, and also my email in case you need to reach out with any specific questions.